The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello people, welcome to the West Midlands for the first time. You find me here on the border between Birmingham and Solihull, and we're heading into Solihull on this route. This is going to be the maddest route I've ever attempted. It's going to be 8 hours of walking, or there or thereabouts, over 5 parishes, one continuous walk. The regulars out there know this is not the norm. Let's get things started. This is Castle Bromwich. Castle Bromwich, Castle in the Broom. This week on TVI, not only am I beginning a brand new district, hello Solihull, I'm also beginning a brand new county. This is the West Midlands, a vast urban conurbation that stretches from Wolverhampton in the west to Coventry in the east. There's not a lot that's villagey out here, which is why the West Midlands has such a small number of parishes. That said, there are a few, and a lot of them are built up urban areas. This week I'm going to be taking on 5 of those in what is the maddest route I've ever attempted to do on foot. I'll be taking on the 5 most northerly parishes in Solihull in one continuous walk, starting with Castle Bromwich. This can be defined as a large suburban village which borders the royal town of Sutton Coldfield, the Birmingham suburbs of Castle Vale, Erdington, Minworth and Hodge Hill, and the rest of Solihull Borough to the southeast. It has a population well in excess of 12,000, making it one of the most populous areas in the borough. That's quite an increase when you consider in 1861 it was just 613. It used to be in Warwickshire until 1974, when it was transferred to the brand new county of the West Midlands. It's a fact, but a few locals still hold on to tradition and claim this is still very much a Warwickshire village. Perhaps adding to the confusion, half of Castle Bromwich is within Birmingham and not Solihull. Some land was ceded in the 1920s for the construction of overspill housing estates, and so this video won't cover the whole of Castle Bromwich, only the portion that's within Solihull. If you're a local, you'll need to keep that in mind. Let's go. We start this mammoth walk on Heathland Avenue, where the boundary of Solihull Borough meets Birmingham. Heading north, the first landmark is the historic parkland of Castle Bromwich Hall. It occupies an area just to the south of the M6's junction with the A452. This parkland belonged to Castle Bromwich Hall, a Jacobean mansion that was built in 1599 by Sir Edward Devereux, the first MP for Tamworth in Staffordshire. The hall is still here, and we'll see it shortly. It was originally a single-storey house with a plain entrance, although it looks a bit different today. This is a local wildlife site. There are many different types of plants here, and there are areas of wetland which provide habitats for wild animals. In 1979, a housing developer wanted to build houses here, but Birmingham City Council soon quashed that idea. They bought the land to prevent that from happening. The parkland is now looked after by the Castle Bromwich Hall Gardens Trust. Let's cross this to get to the first of many religious buildings along this walk, St Mary and St Margaret's Church. We're not far from Birmingham Airport here. You might be able to hear an aircraft in the background there. And now, hopefully you can see it. There it is. That just goes to show how close we are to Birmingham Airport, we can see the underside of some of the planes here. Now, don't get me wrong, this is very much going to be an urban walk, but this parkland is absolutely nothing like that at the moment, is it? It's just glorious open, well, almost like countryside, isn't it? Which is what we're used to seeing on this channel. But trust me, things are going to get very urban later on in this walk. Castle Bromwich has several churches. There are two that are Church of England, there's a Methodist church, and there's also a Baptist church. The original religious building here is St Mary and St Margaret's Parish Church in the west of the village. It's rather unusual because it can be defined as a church within a church. A small stone chapel was known to have stood on this site before 1165. It was replaced in the 15th century by a large half-timbered structure. It was extensively altered between 1726 and 1731 by Sir John Bridgeman. His work would see the old timber building encased in brick and plaster. The massive oak timbers can still be seen in the roof. As churches go, this one is considered to have outstanding architectural and historic merit. Buried in the churchyard here is Edwin Kempson. Born in Birmingham in 1799, he studied religion at Trinity College, Cambridge. He was ordained as a priest at St Philip's Church, which is now Birmingham Cathedral, by the Bishop of Coventry and Lichfield in 1825. Edwin was then made a curate at Aston Church and was sent by Reverend George Peake, the vicar of Aston, to look after Castle Bromwich Chapel in 1827. In that year, the chapel ceased connections with Aston and became a parish church in its own right. So therefore, Edwin Kempson became the first rector of Castle Bromwich. Edwin and his wife Mary had 7 children who were all born at Castle Bromwich. His grandson became the Bishop of Warrington and was noted for his cricketing skills. That's one of the more unusual churches we'll ever see on this channel, isn't it? Now, right next door to the hall, if my phone ever shuts up because it's been pinging all morning for some strange reason, next door to the church we have Castle Bromwich Hall, and this is something of a local tourist attraction. Let's discover why, shall we? It's just over there. So, to Castle Bromwich Hall. After being built in the late 16th century, this was bought by Sir Orlando Bridgeman, the keeper of the Great Seal, in 1657 for his son Sir John. Sir John extended and improved the property in 1672. He added the second floor and a large front porch. His son, also Sir John Bridgeman, inherited it in 1710. He would extend the hall and rebuild it in local handmade clay bricks. The Bridgemans were an important family. They were created Barons of Bradford in 1792 and Earls of Bradford in 1851. A marriage brought Weston Park into their possession, which the family gave to the National Trust in 1986. The hall was then rented out or used for other family members to live in. The Bridgeman family were very religious, and this fact is backed up by some of the features of Castle Bromwich Hall. It's famous for having 12 windows, one for each apostle, and 4 dormers, one for each of the 4 Gospels. The garden door used to pass through a grapevine trimmed into the form of a cross. Lady Ida Bridgeman, or Dowager Countess Bradford, was the last family member to live in the hall. After her exit in 1936, the building was used for storage during World War II. Post-war, it was leased out as an apprentice training centre for the GEC, and then used as offices. It's the same setup today, with many of its outbuildings in use by some small businesses. Don't believe everything you read about this place. The hall reputedly has a set of tunnels linking it to the former vicarage and a former pub nearby, although I'm afraid that's fantasy. Surrounding the hall is the only surviving example in England today of an 18th century formal garden, mainly because it escaped the attentions of Capability Brown. Sir John Bridgeman Jr. originally laid out the hall's gardens in the style in which you can find them now, although they have been restored by the Castle Bromwich Hall Gardens Trust. When the hall was rented out as offices after World War II, only the grass was cut and the rest of the gardens were abandoned. Everything became overgrown. The bushes, which had been cut as neat hedges, grew into tall trees. Walls and buildings began to fall down too. In 1983, the West Midlands County Council sent officers to look at the gardens to decide what should be done with them. Despite being abandoned and overgrown for 50 years, the officers realised that the pattern of Bridgeman's old gardens was still there, unchanged after 200 years. And so, the Castle Bromwich Hall Gardens Trust was established to restore the gardens and to open them to the public. They commenced restoration of the 10-acre site in 1985, and today they're known among the best tourist attractions in the north of Solihull. So trust me, as we travel around this route, the names Bridgeman and Bradford will come up quite a few times. The next thing that also is associated with them is that tree over there. On the patch of grass near the next junction is Lady Ida's tree. This was planted for one of Queen Victoria's jubilees, but nobody knows which one. Here's an interesting house nearby as we join Chester Road. This is called the Southfields and it dates to the middle of the 19th century. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Castle Bromwich was a really good place if you were a wealthy Birmingham businessman. Several of them built large houses here. Most of them have now been demolished and small housing estates or blocks of flats have been built in their place. Southfields was occupied by a number of wealthy people. One such man was John Smallwood, a Birmingham wine merchant whose family later lived at Stetchford Hall. The industrialist Mr. Barclay of Southall Brothers and Barclay also lived here. They had a large factory on Alum Rock Road which made toilet rolls. In 1908 it was occupied by Ernest Radnell, the first man to own a motor car in Castle Bromwich. He also set up the Radco motorcycle company in the early 20th century. During World War II, Southfields became a secret plastics factory and now forms part of the Castle Bromwich Remembrance Club. Here we have an old pub called the Bridgeman Arms Inn, taking its name from the family that lived in the hall. It was built in a 17th century Georgian style and today it's a private residence. Adjacent to this there was once several cottages used by servants. There was also an estate office for the Earl of Bradford. Part of the inn was destroyed by a bomb in World War II when 2 platoons of the Home Guard were based here. The cottages and office have now been replaced by a service road and new houses. Castle Bromwich's first police station was also established here under PC Charlie Whale before moving to a specialist house and lockup next to the Coach and Horses. Policing in this area now is all managed by a station in Chelmsley Wood. It ended up there via Kingshurst, which had a 2-man unit that closed down when Chelmsley Wood Station opened. The guy you saw in that last shot there asked me what I was doing outside the pub there, and he spoke to me in a very, very, very broad Brummie accent. Now, I've been told I can do a very good Brummie accent myself, but I'm not going to attempt it because I'll make myself look like an absolute fool. We're probably going to hear it as we walk on through this lot, through this urban jungle. It hasn't got very urban just yet though, has it? It's about to though, like I keep saying. The next thing on our list is actually an old post office, believe it or not. There's a good reason for this one though. Now here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that Castle Bromwich Post Office was the first located outside of London to have a telephone? It was all to do with former Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. The phone was important to him because it meant he could keep in touch with the government. After all, he was a frequent visitor to Castle Bromwich. He used to visit the hall a lot in the 1870s, possibly to court Lady Chesterfield and Lady Bradford. He was certainly a ladies' man. Later, Queen Mary made use of the telephone when visiting Lady Ida Bridgeman. The post office closed in 2004 and it's now a hairdressing salon. Now we're on Southfield Avenue and that's where we pass the first of an absolutely crazy number of schools in this area. This is St Mary and St Margaret's C of E, a primary school. This isn't the original school. That was located on the edge of the village green and we'll see where in a short while. Let's continue down this road towards Woodford Avenue. Via Ringmere Avenue, next we come to a long, thin car park that belongs to one of Castle Bromwich's many pubs. This car park was the site of Castle Bromwich's first Methodist church in 1845. It was replaced with new buildings on School Lane in 1930 and 1964. The car park is for the local branch of Hickory Smokehouse. This stands close to the site of the former Coach and Horses, which originated as an 18th century coaching inn. The present building isn't the original Coach and Horses though. This was erected in the 1920s and re-roofed in 1938 when its thatch caught fire. Coaching inns were commonplace around here. Two of the many Castle Bromwich used to have survive into the present day. In the 1780s, stagecoaches travelling from Holyhead to London often stopped in the village, as did a regular horse-drawn bus from Birmingham to Coleshill. The turnpikes, which coaches used, lost their importance somewhat when the Midland Railway arrived in 1842, but the inns stand as testament to the village's importance to travellers. Castle Bromwich had a railway station too, which was built in 1901, closed in 1965 and part demolished in 1975. Today, this urban spread has no station and the roads are king again. Now, if it wasn't for the fence in front of that pub, you'd have a brilliant view sat in there of this, the gorgeous Village Green. This was originally known as 7 Acre Green, but there's another one called Whatley Green. This one was given to the village by Viscount Newport in 1895. The village smithy was among the old cottages on the southern edge of the green at one time. In 2012, the 14 houses on the southern edge today were built. They sit on the site of a disused car sales showroom and drive-through car wash, which was demolished in September 2011. The War Memorial was erected in 1920 on this small island at the northern edge of the green, close to the historic centre of Castle Bromwich village. The locals know this by an alternative name, the Castle Bromwich Altar of Remembrance. It's one of the more unusual war memorials we've seen on our travels. It was designed by Charles Edward Bateman, an architect born in 1863. It's rectangular in shape and the names are inscribed on plaques with a cross in the centre of the two lists. On the reverse side it has the words Altar of Remembrance, and you have to say it does resemble a church altar, doesn't it? The memorial sits within a small garden surrounded by a low limestone wall and fairly close to the road. An open-air service is held here annually on Remembrance Sunday. As the historic centre of Castle Bromwich, this is where all the usual facilities and amenities once were, and it still retains a few. This row of shops, for example, line one edge of the green. Also on the edge of the green is Croft Court, which might look like just another clump of houses, but it was quite an important site for Castle Bromwich's children until the late 1960s. This is where the original St Mary and St Margaret's Church of England primary school once stood. It was built in the 19th century and demolished in 1968. The school would relocate to its much larger premises on Southfield Avenue, which allowed it to expand. It soon had a playing field, for example, something that just wasn't possible here. Now, of course, here we're close to Birmingham, we're in Solihull, we're a long way from anywhere in Cheshire. However, this road right here, you can see behind me, once led to Chester. Now we're back on the Chester Road again, and we're close to where once there used to be a toll gate. People had to pay to travel along Chester Road once upon a time. During the 18th century, Castle Bromwich was an important place at the junction of two turnpikes. Chester Road was part of them both. One of them ran from London to Chester and the other ran from Birmingham to Coleshill. A toll gate was put across the road here in 1759 and it stayed here until 1877. The toll collector lived in a small house by the gate. In 1861 it was John Smallwood. The toll house still exists, although the massive 14-foot wide toll gate was lost quite a while ago. Castle Bromwich has been a vital place for travellers since ancient times. Running through it from east to west, there was a pre-Roman trackway, likely used by drovers. It was called the Welsh Road because it linked England with Wales. As its ancient line passes through Castle Bromwich, it follows Chester Road for a short way. Next, we're at the Victory Hall. This was opened in 1922 by Lady Ida Bridgeman to celebrate the end of World War I. The hall was built on land that was owned by the Bridgeman family. It would go on to be used by the Castle Bromwich Community Church, and Google lists it now as a youth and community centre. Next up, we've got the Castle. This is an old pub dating back to the early 18th century when it was the village alehouse. Later it became a general stores and then a private residence. This was never a coaching inn like the others in the village. The castle was a small local pub for the people of Castle Bromwich village. Because this narrow stretch of road was constantly blocked with horses and carts, Lord Bradford made the decision to close the pub in 1907. It then opened as that grocery shop a year later. Some cracking old buildings there, and I've got another one for you next. This here, that's the granary. This is the granary on New Street, which dates back to the early 18th century. It used to be the village malt house, but now it's a private residence. Its upstairs room was once used for church meetings. An adjoining building, which has now been demolished, was an early bowling alley. A private house can now be found on that site. This next thing is all to do with a house called Beechcroft. That's this on your screens now. Originally a farmhouse, this was the last working farm in Castle Bromwich. The building is probably as old as that former post office. Hidden inside is a 16th century timber frame. Cows and horses were kept on the fields behind it until the early 1970s. The farm wasn't always called Beechcroft Farm because they often changed their names to that of the farmer. The last family to farm here were the Rawlins, and so this was known as Rawlins Farm in the 1950s. The family now run Ash End House Children's Farm near Tamworth. In 1802, Lord Bradford owned the farm, but it was let to Reverend Richard Smith. He was the vicar of Monk Hopton in Shropshire and also chaplain to Lord Cathcart, a famous military commander. In 1806, Smith was appointed rector of Long Marston near York, and if you want to learn a bit more about that place, I've been there. The video is linked in today's end screen. A large barn used to stand where the modern Beechcroft Road is today. It was demolished in the 1970s. It had a rather distinctive letter V on it when it came down. That V was for victory. It was placed there by Farmer Rawlins. The reason is all to do with what happened in World War II. Because Castle Bromwich was so close to an airfield, German bombers often dropped incendiaries around here. One of them landed on the barn, killing some of the cows. Rawlins repaired the roof with a V so large it could be seen by German pilots. That's savage, but oddly satisfying. Okay, get ready for a proper fanboy moment here, because this footpath takes us to a street called Wasperton Close. Now, if you are familiar with the indie band The Enemy, you should take note of this street, because this is where Tom Clark grew up. Off Beechcroft Road is a footpath that leads to Wasperton Close. This isn't anything greatly special in terms of its buildings, but someone famous once lived here. The man in question is Tom Clark, the frontman of the early 2000s indie band The Enemy, who were formed in Coventry. He lived in Castle Bromwich when he was young and went to St Mary and St Margaret's School. As a fan of The Enemy myself, this was something I just had to come and see. Their first album, We'll Live and Die in These Towns, went straight to #1 in the UK charts, and I am a proud owner of that record. Now we're at Beechcroft Park, which is where you'll find the local scout hut. Now, as interesting as that is, it's by no means as important as the area to the immediate north. Running along the edge of Beechcroft Park is the A452, and just beyond that is the M6. Beyond them both is the Castle Vale housing estate. By the way, the A452 is known as the Collector Road or the Castle Bromwich and Chelmsley Wood Bypass. Although this is not the closest physical point at which we can see and hear those two major roads, this is perhaps the best place to talk about what's on the other side of the motorway. North of the M6 is a piece of land that used to be part of Castle Bromwich before the parish was split into two pieces. Immediately north of the M6 was Castle Bromwich Aerodrome. It was where Alfred P. Maxwell flew the first aeroplane in the Birmingham area in September 1909, and it later became a stopping place during early air races. The War Office requisitioned it for use by the Royal Flying Corps and flying schools in 1914, when proper roads and buildings were established. In the interwar years, it had both a military and civilian function and became the busiest airport in the area due to its combined passenger, post and railway air business. In 1936, the Air Ministry built the Castle Bromwich Aircraft Factory nearby. A huge shadow factory, it was part of a plan to move vital resources that lay within easy range of German bombers. It would go on to be the largest Spitfire factory in the UK, building over half of the 20,000 which were ever created. After the war, the CBAF became a car body factory, and today it's the Castle Bromwich Assembly Plant. Around here, everyone knows it as Jaguar Land Rover. Incidentally, there's a song on the Enemy's debut album called You're Not Alone. It's about Jaguar Land Rover and how many of its employees were made redundant. As for the airfield, it closed in 1958, and 5 years later, new housing was built on the site. A brand new Birmingham overspill estate, it was called Castle Vale and was completed in 1969. It includes a row of ex-RAF houses along Chester Road and a Spitfire memorial. It's a large steel sculpture called the Sentinel. It was designed by Tim Tolkien. Castle Vale is by no means the only estate that stands on land which used to be part of Castle Bromwich. In 1931, a portion of its land was sold and ceded to the city of Birmingham. The loss of the land halved the area of Castle Bromwich at the time from 2,742 acres to 1,239. On the land, Birmingham would build another overspill development on and around Chipperfield Road just before World War II. Today, there's a post-World War II housing estate known as the Firs Estate. It's just to the west of Castle Bromwich Hall. It takes its name from an old house called the Firs, which was usually occupied by Castle Bromwich's estate bailiff. Now, while we're on the subject of things that are in the vicinity of the M6, let's also throw this into the mix. The castle part of Castle Bromwich's name is all to do with an actual castle. It was sited close to where the M6 meets the A452 at Junction 5. At that point is a mound known locally as Pimple Hill. It's 40 metres in diameter and appears to be a natural feature that was somehow heightened by Iron Age settlers. Pimple Hill commanded an important crossing place of the River Tame. Although somewhat reduced, it's still there, albeit sandwiched between the M6 and the A452. The Pimple name has been commonly used since 1915, and there are stories that float around suggesting it was once a Saxon burial ground, or perhaps close to one. Chester Road used to climb up a steep hill from the River Tame to the church back in the day. It was called Mill Hill by the locals. Towards the bottom of the hill was a brick structure surrounding the Holy Well of St Lawrence. That has now been covered by the roundabout at Junction 5 of the M6. Castle Bromwich Mill stood on the southern bank of the River Tame, close to the bottom of Mill Hill. It was still grinding corn in 1895 and possibly later. It later became an artist's studio until it was demolished in 1956. The M6 now covers the site. There were several other mills in the area, and they mostly drew water from the Tame. Back to the route. Next, we've got a short amble to the east as we make for Parkfield Drive, where there's a restaurant and a medical centre. Many of Castle Bromwich's older buildings have now been demolished. Lots of former farms have also disappeared to make way for new housing and roads. Although it's a very different place to what it was centuries ago, Castle Bromwich has retained some of its village character and it's very active. Via Hungerfield Road and Park Hall Crescent, we're now at one of Castle Bromwich's main communal areas. The place has a well-used multifunctional village hall. It's called Arden Hall and it contains the office of Castle Bromwich Parish Council. The playing fields adjacent to Arden Hall have a sports centre which supports several sports such as cricket, football, golf and tennis. Bromford Lions Football Club also play on them. The hall and the playing fields take their name from the Forest of Arden, the huge forested area that used to cover this part of Birmingham. Water Orton Road next, and if you walk down here back towards the main village green, you'll come to the site of the other one, the much smaller Whatley Green. Whatley Green derives its name from the Anglo-Saxon words for wheatfield clearing. This was the site of the village pinfold as well as a smithy. It had 2 pounds in fact, as well as a set of stocks and a whipping post. There was also a duck pond too, but that was filled in during the 1950s. Whatley Hall was nearby. Not to be confused with Whatley Hall in Banbury, it was a stately home which used to stand within a huge parkland. The architect of the house and its date are unknown because there's very little existing documentation about it. All that remains of the house today, which was Neo-Palladian, is its former lodge on the edge of Whatley Green. Okay, we're about to come back onto Chester Road. Now this little stretch of Chester Road, little being the operative word, has a claim to fame apparently. Briefly, we're back onto Chester Road, and the length of this stretch sort of gives Castle Bromwich a claim to fame, maybe. The part between Whatley Green and Bradford Road is numbered as the B4119. It measures only 320 metres in length and is one of Britain's shortest numbered roads, if not the shortest. Next we come to another pub. This one is a branch of Toby Carvery, but it's got a bit of history to it. As mentioned earlier, 2 old coaching inns still exist here. This originally was the Bradford Arms, taking its name from the former occupants of Castle Bromwich Hall. It was built in 1723 and it's the oldest pub in the village. It used to hold law courts and Catholic services and sits on the site of an earlier pub called the White Lion. Although no longer serving coaches, the high doors to the coach houses can still be seen here. The next thing to talk about comes in the form of this Tesco supermarket on the corner of Chester Road and Timberley Lane. This is where Timberley House once stood. Built in the late 18th century as a farmhouse, it was demolished in the 1930s and a cinema was built on the site. Named the Castle Cinema, it was owned by Harry Dare, who also operated the Atlas Cinema at Stetchford in Birmingham. It opened in 1939, just days before the outbreak of World War II. The opening films were Lewis Stone in Out West with the Hardys and Eleanor Lynn in The Magician's Daughter. It was used as a store during World War II before being demolished in 1962. In 2010, this Tesco supermarket was erected in its place. Yeah, it's hard to believe that that used to be a cinema, but now it's a Tesco Express. So, at this point of the route, things are going to get very, very residential and very quickly as well. Behind me there, you can see there's a street. We're heading up that into this sea of housing. Let's go. Right, for 90% of the remainder of this episode, we're going to be walking through residential areas. Within them are some minor landmarks like shops, but it's nearly all housing now. It's quite incredible just how much Castle Bromwich has expanded over the last 120 years. OS maps from 1900 show a very different story. For a start, this area here was a huge parkland. This is the estate between Water Orton Road and Chester Road, and this is where Whatley Hall and its parkland used to be. The hall was surrounded by considerable wooded grounds and it was the second largest house in the village after Castle Bromwich Hall. It was demolished in 1935 and the housing estate which now occupies this area was built on both its site and its extensive grounds. It was probably built in the 18th century, but there is some evidence to suggest there was an earlier moated structure too, likely 14th century. It was lived in by the Knight family from the 1860s until it was sold and demolished. Before then it was owned by William Newton. He would live there with his sons Canon Horace Newton and Goodwin Newton before they moved to Barrels Hall. Goodwin Newton was maybe the most notable member of that family. He was a landowner, a magistrate, and the chairman of the Imperial Continental Gas Association. Castle Bromwich was originally a Warwickshire village. There has been a settlement here since before Stone Age times. Records and evidence tell us that the area was first settled some 5,000 years ago. The Romans, the Saxons and the Normans have all had a go around here. What makes it such a valuable piece of land would be its location, sitting as it does on a raised piece of land close to the River Tame. Despite the settlement history stretching back thousands of years, Castle Bromwich is not named in the Domesday Book. Bromwich comes from the old words brom, which is a yellow flowering broom that grows here naturally, and witch, which is an ancient name for a dwelling or settlement. For 1,000 years, Castle Bromwich was small, surrounded only by the leafy Warwickshire countryside. Until 1894, Castle Bromwich was part of the large ancient parish of Aston, and yes, that's the same Aston which gives its name to Aston Villa Football Club, which isn't far from here. Castle Bromwich has historic ties with both Erdington and Water Orton through administration, governance and land ownership whilst being part of that parish. The Local Government Act in 1894 created the parish of Castle Bromwich from part of Aston that laid outside both Birmingham and the former Aston Manor urban district. It became the brand new Castle Bromwich Rural District and held that status until 1912 when it was transferred to the Meriden Rural District. So you see, in the blink of an eye, it's gone from a very village-like place to a very suburban-like place, and this is going to be the character you can expect for the rest of this walk all the way to Chelmsley Wood, where I'll eventually finish on Friday. Between here and there's going to be a lot of suburban residential housing and flats and stuff like that. It's just a massive spread of all that kind of stuff. There are landmarks in between all of it though, and one of those is right here. That there is the library. That's next. This is Hurst Lane North, and that building in front of us here is Castle Bromwich Library, just as modern as all this housing that surrounds it. So why did Castle Bromwich expand so much, changing it beyond recognition from a small rural village into effectively a Birmingham suburb? Well, during the 20th century, the population of Birmingham continued to grow, reaching 1 million in 1951. Its enormous expansion started after World War I, when the city council began to improve housing for the thousands of people who lived in inner city slums. Space was becoming an issue. Thousands upon thousands of new council houses were built all around the city in order to cope. Birmingham would soon engulf Sutton Coldfield, which was added to the city in 1964. Gradually, the country areas around the city were built up with roads, houses, shops and factories, and it wasn't long before Castle Bromwich was in the firing line. Now, all the white spaces on the OS map from 120 years ago have been built on, completing Castle Bromwich's huge transformation. At the other end of Hurst Lane North is another school. This one is Castle Bromwich Junior School. This was opened in 1939 and had initially just 66 pupils. It'll be in the hundreds now. Briefly onto Chester Road again, take note of this building on the corner. It's an old people's home and it stands on the site of an old pub which came down in 2012. It was called the Chester Arms. Before that, the pub was known as the Poacher's Pocket and the Timberley Inn. More housing coming your way next. Let's talk about some of the notable people who have lived here in Castle Bromwich. Among the many is of course Charles Bateman, the architect who designed the Altar of Remembrance. Another is Sir Edwin Cooper Perry. Brought up locally, he was the Vice-Chancellor of the University of London between 1917 and 1919. Music fans may well know this next name, Roger Taylor. He was the drummer in Duran Duran and used to live on Hawthorne Road, where he taught himself to play drums. One of his near neighbours was the former footballer Trevor Francis. The Birmingham City and Nottingham Forest legend used to live just a few doors away when Taylor was a child. On the music theme, we already know about Tom Clark, but Castle Bromwich also has links to ELO's Jeff Lynne, who lived at Shardane Crescent for a time. The list goes on and on and on. Also of note are Birmingham historian William Hutton, former Aston Villa footballers Peter McParland, Gary Shaw and Lee Hendry, and the TV producer Alan Coleman. Behind Selworthy Road is a small park. It's called Hob Farm Park, and its name is linked to an actual farm that stood here from the 1700s until the 1950s. These houses were then built on the farmland. The word hob means a hobgoblin or a mischievous sprite. It was a common name for farms and moated sites across the country. A hob looks like whatever your imagination wants it to. Some local people call this park the Old Barn, after the barn that was still standing even after the houses were built. Okay, so we were on Castle Bromwich's Paul's Parkland about two and a quarter hours ago. That's how long it's taken me to get to this point here. We're not a million miles away from the end of Castle Bromwich. The border with the next one is coming up in a short while. There's still a couple of things to see here. One of them is another church, then we've got a pub to see, and then there's a big school which is right on the border. Now we come to St Clement's Church in the east of the village, which is far newer than its western counterpart. This was built in 1967, not long after Castle Bromwich was split in two. This is far less interesting than its western neighbour over at St Mary and St Margaret's, but no less important, serving as it does the eastern half of modern day Castle Bromwich. Speaking of things that are cut into two pieces, this is Green Lane, which runs from east to west, splitting this part of Castle Bromwich into two parts. It has another school, this time Castle Bromwich Infant and Nursery. It was built with the estate and works in conjunction with the junior school on Hurst Lane North. Let's head for the end of this street, because where it meets Water Orton Road, we'll find the final pub on this walk. This is the Farthings. Its sign shows a man riding an old-fashioned bicycle known as a penny farthing, and it used to show its cyclist juggling with farthing coins. However, the pub's name is not taken from either the coin or the bike. There was a pub here long before the building that stands here now. It stood near some small fields which were known as the Farthings. The word comes from the Old English word fearthing, which means fourth part or a quarter. Originally, the word was used to describe fields that had been divided up into four parts, but it was later just used as the name for a small field. Okay, the border with the next one is in sight. All we've got left is this residential area you can see here, and the school, which is right on the edge of it. Our final area is called Parkfield, or alternatively Park Hall. It was the site of a moated manor house first mentioned in records in 1265. It's known to have been owned by Henry de Arden in 1373. Supposedly haunted, it was demolished in the early 1970s during construction of the M6. The only remnants of the building now are within the nearby Park Hall Wildlife Reserve. The name, though, lives on by way of Park Hall Academy, the largest secondary school in the borough of Solihull. Formerly Park Hall School, this is a mixed secondary school and sixth form which was previously administered by Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council. Park Hall School converted to academy status in September 2009 and was renamed Park Hall Academy. The school is now part of the Arden Multi-Academy Trust. Even so, it continues to coordinate with Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council for admissions. It offers GCSEs and BTECs as programmes of study for pupils. Among Park Hall's most famous former pupils is Mark Silk, a voice actor who's heard but not very often seen. You do know him. He's known as the man with a million voices. You've heard him on things like You've Been Framed and the children's classic Pingu. He's probably best known though for being the voice of another children's favourite, the cartoon character Johnny Bravo. He was also the voice of Bob the Builder in the USA. We've reached Lanchester Way, which bends around a housing estate known as the Cars. We'll discuss that tomorrow because this road is also the parish boundary with Smiths Wood. Lanchester Park sits on the Castle Bromwich side, and it's the ideal point to wrap up part 1 of this 5-part walk. The other 4 won't be as intense as this one, but they will still be interesting. Yeah, I was hoping to see a bit more of Park Hall School than that, but most of it is shielded from public view. Don't despair though, people, if you like your schools, because this next parish has got loads of them. In fact, it's rather famous for some of its schools. I'm standing right now in Lanchester Park, which is on the northernmost boundary of the next parish. If I turn the camera around, you'll see the estate which we're about to make our way through. But if you want to see that, you'll have to come back tomorrow. That's part 1 of this 5-part walk complete. Welcome back to Solihull again, everybody, for part 2 of this mega walk this week. Now, we've seen Castle Bromwich, and that was by far the biggest one of these 5. This one's a lump smaller, and it's a lot more residential. In fact, our first area here, this estate behind me, is quite notable because all the streets are named after cars. This is the very nicely named Smiths Wood. Smiths Wood, Smiths Wood. Hello Solihull people, today we continue the walk where we left off yesterday at the border between Castle Bromwich and Smiths Wood. Whilst Castle Bromwich took up so much time because it had so much to talk about, Smiths Wood is a little less heavy. This is essentially Castle Bromwich's little brother. The two share a lengthy boundary which makes its way through a sea of suburban housing built after the war that we learnt about yesterday. North Warwickshire touches the parish in its north and east, whilst Kingshurst and Castle Bromwich are to the west. It's not known for a lot, but a few things are of note here. Smiths Wood is perhaps best known for its schools and its woodland. The woodland in question is the ancient Smiths Wood, which gives the place its name. It's one of the only remaining fragments these days of the once huge Forest of Arden, and it was designated a local nature reserve in 2004. Smiths Wood has a population of just over 10,000, making this one of the most densely populated places around Birmingham. There is a discernible village centre here. It's not all housing. The modern centre is based around a central street, a regenerated area that once contained a pub called The Local, which was semi-famous in these parts. The regeneration cost some £1.4 billion and saw many flats and houses from the 1960s and 70s completely flattened and replaced with brand new ones. New features also include a state-of-the-art medical centre, a post office, a library, a community hub and a new private housing estate. Smiths Wood is going places now, and so are we. So yesterday we left off at the border between Smiths Wood and Castle Bromwich at Lanchester Park. The park sits just to the north of our first landmark here, which is a massive housing estate. Smiths Wood is mostly housing from top to bottom, although there is a village centre. This northernmost housing estate has streets that will have familiar names to you all. This is known as the Cars Estate or the Cars Area, and it consists mostly of red brick terraces. These were built mostly in the late 1970s. The Cars Estate is an overspill, built thanks to the expansion of the pre-existing Chelmsley Wood North Estate. The area is distinct around here because of its cosy atmosphere. The majority of its properties are inward facing, with the front doors facing greens, gullies and pavements. All of the streets on the Cars Estate are named after car makes. These include some well-known British ones like Vauxhall, Morris, Rover and Austin. In fact, the whole estate is a nod to Birmingham's role in the British car manufacturing industry and heritage. Let's make our way through this now towards a pub. This is the Kingfisher on Rover Drive, and to the delight of the locals, it's recently been reopened. Just before the pandemic struck in 2020, this was mothballed. Its reopening, according to the landlady, was definitely something this community needed. I would tend to agree. Smiths Wood has plenty of facilities, but not a great amount of pubs. The whole thing was completely renovated. It was ripped out entirely and then put back together, giving it a fresher feel. Now it's thriving, and the hope is that soon it'll be able to do food. Yeah, in this part of Solihull, pubs aren't really a major thing. There are a few within these big housing estates, but not very many. So to see the Kingfisher is kind of a rare find. Now, what's not a rare find are communal halls and schools. There's plenty of those in Smiths Wood. Let's go and find one of the former, Auckland Hall. That's next. Just the other side of the pub is a communal building. This is Auckland Hall, and it's effectively the village hall for the Cars Estate. The whole estate is tied together by a close-knit community, and has been for years. In 2012, the residents of this part of Smiths Wood formed a community group called Cars Area Together. Resident-led and voluntary, it was established as part of the National Lottery's Big Local initiative. It provides valuable community services to the Cars area, for the people and by the people. Auckland Hall is the base for the group, and without its founding, this might still be derelict. Since the group received its funding, they helped bring this once defunct building back to life. Now it's a thriving community hub hosting loads of vital things, such as food banks for example. It's so good to see this sort of thing being well used. So even though this one doesn't have a lot of pubs, one thing Smiths Wood does really well is education. In addition to mainstream schools, Smiths Wood has 4 others which cater for SEND and SEMH pupils between the ages of 3 and 18. 2 of them, Forest Oak and Merston, share a building within the grounds of Smiths Wood Academy, which is the area's secondary school. Then there's Castlewood School on Jensen Avenue, which caters for children with SEMH, and the 4th and final one is the Heights Academy on Auckland Drive. This is that very school. The Heights Academy primarily caters for autistic children between the ages of 7 and 16 and forms part of the Forward Education Trust. It was established in 2023 and occupies purpose-built premises on the site of the former Bosworth Infant and Junior School. The school initially educated pupils in years 3 to 7, but began accepting pupils up to year 11 at the end of the 2023-24 academic year. The school is renowned for its specialised curriculum and teaching methods designed to meet the specific needs of its students. Despite that, there have been concerns raised about the school's handling of bullying claims and parents' complaints, prompting an independent investigation into these matters. Regardless, Smiths Wood is lucky to have this facility right on its doorstep. If you live here, you are well and truly covered as far as education goes. Okay, so we've seen the cars area, and Smiths Wood does have a lot of other residential areas as well. We're going to make our way through another one now towards the village centre, and while we do, we'll take this opportunity to talk about a guy who used to live in Smiths Wood. I have no idea whereabouts he actually resided, but if you say his name to one of the residents around here, they're bound to know who you're talking about. Now we've got a longish walk through some more residential areas as we head towards the village centre. This is the ideal time to mention Smiths Wood's most famous former resident. His name was Barry Austin, and he was rather infamous for his size. He was widely reputed to be the fattest man in the United Kingdom. Multiple press reports claimed that his peak weight was 50 stone. That's around 700 pounds or 320 kilograms. He was one heavy bloke. Austin's appearances in the press and on TV were usually related to concerns about obesity in the UK. Austin was also the star of a Sky One documentary, Inside Britain's Fattest Man. It was presented by fellow Solihullian Richard Hammond in the manner of the science fiction film Fantastic Voyage. According to the programme, Austin typically consumed in excess of 29,000 calories a day, over 10 times the average daily intake for a UK male, and had major health problems as a result. He also claimed to drink up to 40 pints on a night out. Now, I've been known to sink a few, but 40 is well out of my league. He was something of a celebrity on the Birmingham club circuit and a very visible supporter of Birmingham City at their home games. Austin's greatest problem was his legs, which notably reduced his mobility. They were starved of blood because of their enormous size and distance from his heart. They would cause him to suffer regular bacterial infections that left him swollen, in agony, and immobile. In December 2009, his weight gained him an acting role. He played the part of Big Brian in ITV1's comedy drama The Fattest Man in Britain, which starred Timothy Spall and Bobby Ball. Although committing himself to a new diet plan in 2005, the damage was already done. He lived to the age of 52 and died in 2021 of a heart attack. Okay, we're about to come into Smiths Wood's village centre. Now, if you are a Smiths Wood resident that's moved abroad to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, wherever in the world, this might look a little bit different to you if you've not been back for a few years, because it's undergone a massive regeneration. You'll see what I mean in a moment. This is the centre of Smiths Wood. It can be defined today by this brand new high street lined with an array of shops. The centre of Smiths Wood had previously been defined by the Arran Way shopping centre, although it was a bit different to what this looks like. Arran Way, which is just around the corner from here, is now the site of some privately owned homes constructed by Bellway as part of a regeneration project which began in 2008. The old shopping centre was torn down, and replacing it was this much fresher looking centre, which can boast a state-of-the-art medical centre, a new post office, a library and a community hub. The whole project cost £1.4 billion. As part of it, many flats and houses which were mostly built in the 1960s and 70s were demolished because they were old and run down. As well as the brand new village centre, Smiths Wood gained a brand new school. This is Smiths Wood Primary Academy, which originally opened as Smiths Wood Community Primary School. When it was completed in 2009, this was, at the time, one of the largest primary schools in the country. It replaced the former Kingfisher Primary School that once stood on its sports field. Pupils from the old Bosworth Wood Primary School were merged with the ones from Kingfisher to jointly occupy this new building. At present, the school is considered to be the best primary school in Solihull, and it proudly sits within the top 100 in the country. There are 2 primary schools in Smiths Wood. As well as this, there's also St John the Baptist Roman Catholic Primary a little further around this route. Well, get used to seeing these things, people, because before we finish this massive walk, we're going to see plenty of them. Tower blocks. 2 of them here on the edge of Smiths Wood village centre. Now, there used to be another one of these, at least another one, but it's been pulled down and it's been replaced with newer housing. I'm going to show you now where the old village centre used to be. So now we've seen the new, what happened to the old? Follow me as we make our way through some more residential areas to the site of the Arran Way shopping centre. So here we are at the Smiths Wood Sports and Social Club, which escaped demolition despite being right on the edge of the old shopping centre. It used to be the case that if you walked out of the front doors of this building, you were literally a few yards away from the Arran Way shopping centre. Now demolished and replaced by a brand new street called Mull Croft, Arran Way was old and run down. It was in desperate need of something new and fresh. Also demolished as part of the works was a massive tower block, the likes of which we'll see later when we hit Chelmsley Wood. The shopping centre contained shops, a post office and the offices for Solihull community housing. Although it was dated, it's sorely missed by some of the locals here. In particular, one thing that's definitely missed is a pub called The Local, which has now been replaced with new properties on the corner of Mullcroft and Arran Way. I read a few tales about the pub on some local Facebook groups, including quite a few claims that quite a bit of underage drinking went on in the pub. Some even reckon the demolition of the whole area was a secret plan by the council to turn this part of Solihull teetotal. I doubt that, but it's amazing to read people's thoughts. So if you go on Google Maps and look at the imagery from 2008, you can see where that tower block that's been pulled down used to be. It was kind of in this area here where these houses are, or just behind them. You can see it on the map. It's not there anymore. A stone's throw away from all the new builds is St John the Baptist Roman Catholic School, which we alluded to earlier. And speaking of schools, our next job is to make our way towards another. That means walking down Ellis Drive, where we'll meet the long straight road that is Auckland Drive. It runs parallel to the A452 and the M6 on the eastern edge of the parish. This next building can't really be termed a school, but it is educational. This is the Woodlands campus of Solihull College, and it was completed in 2006. Officially known as Solihull College and University Centre, it's a further education college which is spread across two main campuses. Its main site is the Blossomfield campus in central Solihull, whilst the Woodlands campus is a satellite. The college offers both full-time and part-time higher education courses, as well as apprenticeships and bespoke employment training. Across the two sites, facilities include an animal welfare centre, a virtual reality lab, industry standard science labs, and a health and care skills suite. Blossomfield campus also has both an aircraft hangar and flight simulators. Woodlands has motor vehicle and construction workshops, tying in nicely with the car manufacturing history of the area. In February 2018, the college merged with another further education establishment, Stratford-upon-Avon College. That increased the size and influence of the combined college in the region, and some reckon it will soon be a fully fledged university college. No announcements, though, have yet appeared along those lines. Former Solihull College and University Centre students include the world-famous Northern Ireland footballer Will Grigg. I wonder, was he on fire when he was here? Okay, we're about 3/4 of the way around Smiths Wood now, which is pretty good considering Castle Bromwich's length. But yeah, we haven't got much left of this walk. Basically, we're going to get ourselves to Chester Road, see a couple of more schools, and Smiths Wood itself, by the way, because it is actually a wooded area, and then we'll make for the boundary with the next one. Now, ethnically, Smiths Wood can be considered the most ethnically diverse parish in Solihull. That said, in 2001, it had only the 6th highest proportion of non-white residents in the borough. That has increased significantly over the last 14 years. In terms of ethnic diversity, it's important to note that all wards in the borough are well below the West Midlands average of 11%. Religiously, buildings for worship seem to be lacking here, regardless of faith. Nearby Castle Bromwich helps with those, though. There are at least 2 in Smiths Wood. This here is the local Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses on Windward Way. Let's follow this road as we head towards Smiths Wood Academy. When I said Smiths Wood was famous for its schools, I really wasn't kidding. Smiths Wood Academy is the parish's secondary school and was formerly known as Smiths Wood Sports College. Formerly a community school administered by Solihull Metropolitan Borough Council, this is now sponsored by the Fairfax Multi-Academy Trust. It's the main senior school attended by local children, although some attend other schools in the wider North Solihull area. Perhaps the best known features of this school would be its swimming pool, its rock climbing wall, its fitness centre and its other sports facilities. They are all often used by the community. The darkest moment in its history came in 1977 when a fire ripped through part of the school, destroying some changing rooms. Since then, it's bounced back admirably. Nottingham Forest footballer Jamie Ward grew up in Smiths Wood and he attended this school. Philanthropist and parliamentarian Cameron Grant also attended this school. He stood as the Conservative candidate for Smiths Wood in the 2024 Solihull local elections. Now, as we learned earlier, there are 4 special schools here. We've seen one of them and mentioned another, and here we have the other 2 which share a site within Smiths Wood Academy. These are Forest Oak and Merston schools. Forest Oak was initially located on Lanchester Way in Castle Bromwich and was established by 1970. In June 2006, it moved to this new campus on Windward Way, alongside Merston School. Forest Oak serves children aged 4 to 19 with moderate learning difficulties. As for Merston, that was originally named Merston Day Special School and opened in Marston Green in January 1974. Parents successfully prevented its closure and transfer in 1993, and the school moved to Smiths Wood in the summer of 2006, joining Forest Oak School on this brand new site. Merston School serves children aged 2 to 19 with severe learning and profound and multiple learning difficulties. When compared to Forest Oak, it's effectively the other end of the spectrum. Okay, so once past the schools there, the next thing to talk about is a Catholic church on this corner, and that stands in front of this. Smiths Wood is not called Smiths Wood for nothing. On the other side of the academy is a Catholic church dedicated to St John the Baptist. The school we saw earlier is on the other side of this building. So too is Arran Way Social Club. We've come all the way around this route almost, and we still haven't seen the landmark that gives Smiths Wood its actual name, but we're about to. After the church has disappeared from view, things get very leafy on Windward Way. With the exception of this road, this wood is the only thing that remains from before urbanisation. This is the ancient Smiths Wood, a tiny clump of trees which once formed part of the ancient Forest of Arden. It was officially designated a local nature reserve in 2004. As one of Arden's only remaining fragments, it's very isolated, located far, far away from any other woodlands of its type. Given that Smiths Wood has a population of just over 10,000, making this one of the most densely populated places around Birmingham, it's even more out of place. The funny thing is about this wood though, is that 120 years ago it was still all on its own, surrounded by fields instead of houses. On the edge of the wood there was once a farm. Named Burton's Farm, it was part of the estates of Coleshill Manor and Kingshurst Hall in Warwickshire, and lends its name to Burton's Way, which is where the modern village centre is. So now you see we've come full circle, because this park here, which you can see on camera now, that is dead opposite the tower blocks which I showed you at the edge of the village centre, which means we have almost completed this circuit of Smiths Wood. There is one more landmark to see, and that is the only other pub in Smiths Wood. Up there, there's a left turn, takes you down to something called the Toby Jug, and that is right on the boundary with the next one. We have one landmark left. Using Buckingham Road, we're heading for the parish boundary, where this episode will end and tomorrow's will begin. Right on the boundary is a pub called the Toby Jug. Usually, pubs that bear that name are related to 18th century pottery. Toby jugs were pottery pieces popular in England. They usually depict a man with a pipe and beer stein, and were a popular part of British culture. Toby jug pubs and Toby jug pottery have a distinct connection, with the pottery serving as a visual and cultural representation of the pub's identity. I have literally no idea why this pub would have been connected to pottery though. This area is all about cars, not pots. It was, after all, in Warwickshire, not Staffordshire. This isn't the Potteries. We have reached the end of episode number 2. Time to take a short breather before we continue on to the next one. Parish number 3 on the walk is the one that's the most village-like. In it, we'll encounter another ancient wood that used to be part of the Forest of Arden. Stay tuned everyone, I'll see you back here tomorrow. Welcome back to Solihull everybody for round 3 of 5 on this massive walk. My feet are starting to feel it right now, but I've still got plenty of energy, so we should be able to make it to the end without any problems. We've dealt with 2 of them, let's see if we can deal with a third. You rejoin me at the Toby Jug where you left me yesterday, on the boundary between Smiths Wood and Kingshurst. Kingshurst, Kingswood. Round 3 in Solihull sees us enter the parish of Kingshurst after leaving Smiths Wood behind us. Kingshurst is a large post-war suburban village, and of all the parishes we're seeing this week, this is the one that's most like an actual normal village. Historically part of the county of Warwickshire, we are now 7 miles north of Solihull town centre here and 10 miles east of Birmingham. Kingshurst borders North Warwickshire to the east, and the village is encompassed within the electoral ward of Kingshurst and Fordbridge. The name Kingshurst comes from having previously been a royal manor, and hurst means wood. There are very few wooded areas here now. During World War I, much of it was cut down to help with the war effort. However, there is one notable patch that remains. It was bought by the Birmingham and District Association of Boy Scouts, and they were able to set up a permanent camp there. The land, which was halfway between Kingshurst and Shard End, was called Yorkswood, and it opened in 1923. We'll be seeing that on this walk. The earliest record of Kingshurst is in documents from the late 13th and early 14th centuries, when it's referred to as part of the manor of Coleshill. Tenant farming was administered from here, and Simon de Montfort of Coleshill was a nobleman who built a moated manor house in the village with its own park and farmlands. It no longer stands though. It was pulled down in 1969 in order to make way for yet more housing for the ever-expanding city of Birmingham. So this one's a bit different, but it's still very, very urban. Let's go walking once again. You rejoin me at the Toby Jug pub, right on the border between Kingshurst and Smiths Wood. The boundary is primarily formed in the north and east by the Chester Road. That means our first landmark in Kingshurst is a surgery on the opposite side. Let's pass that and head down over Green Drive to get to the village centre. Kingshurst is a relatively new parish. It only came into being during the 1950s because before that time this was all fields and woodlands. The expansion of Birmingham has really changed it all. Kingshurst takes its name from a former hall that stood within the open countryside that all this used to be. Even today, some folk refer to it not as a village, but as the Kingshurst Hall Estate. The parish council has 12 members, which are elected every 4 years. Politically, it's represented in the House of Commons in the Meriden and Solihull East parliamentary constituency. Unlike Smiths Wood, there are several places of worship here. There are 4 places in Kingshurst, in fact. This is an Anglican church dedicated to St Barnabas, situated off Church Close. Because Kingshurst only came into being in the 1950s, so too did this church. In March 1955, work began on building the first church for the estate. St Barnabas's was designed by the Birmingham architect Maurice A.H. Hobbis. At the time, he described his design as modern in concept but using traditional materials. The foundation stone was laid on the 25th of September 1955 by Mrs Wilson, the wife of the Bishop of Birmingham, who would later appeal to raise £1.2 million for extensions to the building. The first priest in charge here was Reverend Peter Hollis, formerly the curate at Yardley and at Coleshill. When he was appointed, he had no church to attend because it was still being built. To combat that, he held services in his own home, a council house in Laburnum Avenue. He also held services in other residents' living rooms. Mr Hollis took many photographs of Kingshurst as it was developed. When he left the area, he gave his images to Stan Tarrant, who then donated them to Solihull Library. Some of the 1950s images of Kingshurst collected by Stan Tarrant have also been put together as a YouTube video, and I went and found that. I've linked it in the description below. By 1957, St Barnabas's church was complete and dedicated as a separate ecclesiastical parish, severing its ties from Coleshill. Peter Hollis would remain vicar of Kingshurst until 1967. Hollis knew how difficult life was for people in the 1950s around here. He knew that for most, settling down in a new area with complete strangers was a tough task. He even described it as a bit lonely at times. However, that's where the church came in, giving the estate a sense of community, which to this day, it's never lost. Okay, let's head on into Kingshurst Village Centre. Now, I don't really know what to expect from this because the Google Maps imagery that you can see is very old, and so this may look a bit different to what I saw before I came here. Apparently, it's undergone something of a transformation, a little bit like Smiths Wood, which we covered yesterday. Let's go and see, shall we? One of the first things to be developed for the locals when Kingshurst first appeared on the map was a brand new village centre, and it was to feature a whole host of facilities. It had everything you'd perhaps expect from a small town centre. It still does, although now it's being given a massive overhaul. The original shopping centre was built in the 1960s and was at the time considered state-of-the-art. However, much like Smiths Wood, most of it's now been demolished to make way for a new one. Soon to be completed, the shopping area is undergoing a major redevelopment, funded jointly by Solihull Borough Council and the West Midlands Combined Authority. The master plan includes between 75 and 80 new social and privately owned houses, a new park, 4 retail outlets, a village hall and a coffee house. The new village centre is going to be everything you would expect from a modern suburban nucleus. The new high street is even going to be given a new name, Boulevard. Kingshurst Centre has things like a library, a post office, an opticians and a hair salon and some general stores, but it will soon have a lot more. Just to the south of the village centre is Kingshurst Park off Gilson Way and Marston Drive. The bulk of it is behind the car park for the New Testament Church of God. This is popular with dog walkers, cyclists and joggers, as well as being a go-to spot in the summer months for picnics. The children's play area is its main facility, with a range of equipment and outdoor activities on offer. The park was included within Solihull Council's master plan to regenerate the area. Yeah, so as it turns out, you can't see a lot of the village centre at the moment, can you? Because the builders are in. It's going to look fantastic, I'm sure, when it's completed. The edge of the old shops is still visible though, so you can see what it used to be like. And that's what I saw on the map before I came here. Didn't know what to expect, and that's what I got. Okay, let's make our way through the park. On the corner of the park, there's a church. We'll turn around there and head up towards a school next. In the southeastern corner of the park is church number 2. This is a Pentecostal church, but it goes by the more formal name of the New Testament Church of God. There's not a great deal to say about this, although I did think the building design was cool. Let's head up Gilson Way next to past the surgery, and then we'll be at the first of the schools in the area. Kingshurst has 3 primary schools, namely they are Kingshurst Primary, St Anthony's Catholic Primary and Yorkswood Primary. In addition, there are 4 preschool groups. This is Kingshurst Primary, which was built in 2007. That makes it the newest of the schools in this one. It replaced 2 former schools, Kingshurst Infants and Kingshurst Juniors. The 2 schools have now amalgamated, and the children who attended them at the time chose the design for this, their brand new building, themselves. The most attended senior schools for Kingshurst children are Tudor Grange Academy on Cook's Lane and John Henry Newman Catholic College on Chelmsley Road. Lots also attend the Coleshill School in Warwickshire and Smiths Wood Academy across the Chester Road in Smiths Wood. The nearest independent school is in Solihull Town Centre. So here's a word on the housing in this area. This private development on and to the east of Gilson Way consists of mainly detached and semi-detached dwellings. The houses in this area are considered to be the 3rd most expensive homes in northern Solihull, behind only a nearby area of Castle Bromwich and part of Marston Green. As well as Gilson Way, the roads in this area are all named after nearby Warwickshire villages, like Moxall and Meriden. Kingshurst has had a few notable residents in its time. These include Gary Shaw, the former Aston Villa footballer. Even though he lived mainly in Castle Bromwich, his birthplace is in Kingshurst. He was born at a house on Meriden Drive in 1961. He lived there until the 1980s, by which time he was already an established key player at Villa. And you can bet, by the way, that Kingshurst is very much an Aston Villa supporting area. Yeah, I think you can tell potentially that we are in a very quiet area here, because for the first time since this walk started, there's no traffic around. Everything just seems so peaceful. If I just shut up for a second and you guys listen, you see what I mean? See, we're a long way from the major roads now. The Chester roads, the M6s, the A452s, all that lot is behind us, and now we're in a peaceful part of this walk. It's nice actually. Let's continue on through this estate and it will take us towards an area that's got both a Roman Catholic school and a Roman Catholic church. You see, in Kingshurst there's quite a big Roman Catholic community. Now we're coming into an area that's dominated by two Roman Catholic landmarks. Kingshurst has one of the largest Catholic communities in the Birmingham area. This here is the second school, St Anthony's Roman Catholic Primary, and just around the corner on Oakthorpe Drive is the church dedicated to St Anthony of Padua. An economical but well-detailed church, this was designed to meet the emerging liturgical requirements of the Second Vatican Council. It's notable for its atmospheric use of top lighting. The external character of the building has been compromised a little since by some unsympathetic alterations and additions. The parish was formed from Castle Bromwich and Shard End in 1960, and at first Mass was celebrated in the school. The present church was designed in 1965 by Rush, Granelli and Partners and completed by Remo and Mary Granelli. It can seat 440. It cost some £37,000 to build. It's a low, single-storey, flat-roofed building with the main worship space that's square in plan with an attached Lady Chapel. The altars in both the main space and the Lady Chapel are cast in white concrete with Cornish granite aggregate. In 1981, St Anthony's merged with St John the Evangelist elsewhere in Kingshurst, and a stained glass window was installed to mark that event. In 2014, it was decided to deconsecrate the main space of the church so that the school could use it for their needs. However, the Lady Chapel was retained as a place of worship. Okay, so just like in Castle Bromwich on Monday, everything's now going to start and get a little bit more residential, shall we say. Take an about turn here. I'm going to go up here. There's a street on the right where that tree is. We're going to go up there and follow a huge, great big long residential area all the way up to Yorkswood. Right, now we have a long walk to get to our next landmark. This will take us through a lot of housing. This gives us chance, finally, to fill in how Kingshurst came about in the 1950s. As we know already, shortly after World War II, housing was needed to allocate civilians who had been bombed out of their homes in Birmingham. The development of the Kingshurst Hall estate was the first time that the Birmingham Corporation had ever built dwellings outside the city boundaries. It was also the first time that the council had had a housing scheme that included owner-occupied housing as well as council housing. It was new ground for them. It still had the same idea. It was providing relief from overcrowding in urban areas. The intention was to move people from decaying inner cities to better conditions in more rural areas. The Birmingham Corporation purchased blocks of land in the eastern parts of Kingshurst and built a sea of houses and a couple of tower blocks. It was all part of an extended overspill project for housing across the wider Birmingham area. A few thousand families from the slums of the inner city migrated to Kingshurst. They came here in the hope of starting a fresh life in a new, rural location. It was this area which helped to improve transport connectivity between the village and the city, actually. Regular bus services were increased greatly when the new residents arrived. Soon, the nearby areas of Shard End, Fordbridge, Chelmsley Wood and Smiths Wood began to develop too. They would swallow up the remainder of the rural landscape around Kingshurst in the 1960s and 70s, meaning that Kingshurst soon became contiguous with them all. In order to develop Kingshurst, the Birmingham Corporation had compulsorily purchased Kingshurst Hall and its surrounding farmland. We'll see where that was in a short while. As the land was outside the city boundaries, they had to seek agreement for its proposals from both Meriden Rural District Council and gain planning consent from Warwickshire County Council. The original Kingshurst Hall estate was 261 acres in terms of size. In 1952, Birmingham proceeded with plans to build 2,000 homes for up to 10,000 city residents at a cost of around £3 million. Approximately 20% of the dwellings were to be owner-occupied and 80% were to be municipal housing. The council houses would be owned by Birmingham City Council, but for all other services, the residents would come under Meriden Rural District Council and Warwickshire County Council. It was, according to the council's plans at the time, to be purely a dormitory area, with no intentions for any heavy industry to later develop. Many of the first residents to move in were used to living in back-to-back houses in Birmingham and felt that Kingshurst, in comparison, was quite posh. After all, their new homes provided them for the first time with hot running water and proper toilets. In those days, they were luxuries that not everyone had. Okay, it's all of a sudden got very leafy. Behind us there we have York's Wood. This is one of the only fragments remaining now of the gigantic Forest of Arden that used to cover this entire area. Well, York's Wood has a few things it can tell us. There's something rather special about this if you were in the Scouts. So now we're on York's Wood Drive, and now I'm going to take you back to a time when Birmingham's plans were just a figment of the imagination. Kingshurst's name means King's Wood. That figures because this area used to be blanketed in trees many centuries ago, being part of the huge Forest of Arden. During World War I, much of the woodland in Kingshurst was cut down to help with the war effort, but there are still patches that remain. The largest is York's Wood. In 1921, the Birmingham and District Association of Boy Scouts were able to buy York's Wood from the former Meriden Rural District at a bargain price. They would then set up a permanent camp here. The land, which is halfway between Kingshurst and Shard End, held 5 camp fields covering an area of 25 acres. The total site was over 200 acres, and it benefited from permanent wash houses and latrines, a swimming pool, a training centre, a guest house and a series of huts. Nearby was a small brook and a spring, which meant the camp had adequate supplies of water. Nearby Cock Sparrow Farm, about 100 yards away, provided fresh milk. The entrance to the camp was flanked by a series of griffin statues. They came from the roof of Lewis's department store on Corporation Street in central Birmingham when it was being renovated. After the camp closed in 1972, they were placed on the housing estate over the Solihull-Birmingham border. You can find them on Kendrick Avenue today. Although some of the camp was built upon by some of the local roads, the bulk of the forest is still here, and it acts as a border between Birmingham and Solihull to this day. 9% of Kingshurst's population identify as being from an ethnic minority background. That is proportionately smaller than many other areas of Solihull. For example, Solihull itself has double that percentage at 18, whilst the national average stands at 19. 44% of the ethnic minority population in Kingshurst are from a mixed or multiple ethnic group, representing 6% of the total population. 50% of households in Kingshurst are owned or at least part-owned outright or through a mortgage. Housing-wise, the most common type here is detached or semi-detached. Flats and apartments make up 26% of Kingshurst properties, with most of them leased by Solihull Community Housing. Well, the weather forecast said it was due to rain at some point today. Doesn't look like it at the moment. I kind of wish it would right now, because the temperature is definitely a long way north of what it was when I started this walk. It's getting quite warm out here. It was nice in the wood actually, just to take a breather from it. But we're back in the sunshine now. Speaking of York's Wood, this school right here shares its name. This is York's Wood Primary. So yes indeed, York's Wood lends its name to a local primary school. This here on Kingshurst Way is York's Wood Primary. By passing this, we're heading for the area where Kingshurst Hall used to stand. Kingshurst Hall was a large country manor house surrounded by a moat built in around 1390 by Sir William Montfort, the son of Sir Baldwin Montfort. Kingshurst took on an independent existence from Coleshill with their arrival. It's unclear how Kingshurst came into their possession though. In all likelihood, they bought the area from the Clintons, who were lords of the manor of Coleshill. What is certain is that they were in possession of Kingshurst by about 1352. They lived in a moated manor house, but we can't see that because it no longer stands. It was demolished in the 1960s to accommodate post-war housing for the ever-expanding nearby Birmingham. The hall stood in this area between Kingshurst Way and Stonebridge Crescent. There aren't many visible clues to its once existence, but there are some. These mounds at the foot of two massive tower blocks are earthworks. They are the remains of the moated site which Kingshurst Hall occupied or stood close to. The history of this area, whilst known mostly, is not an exact science. The mounds you see here were likely the site of an ancient castle, but nobody really knows a lot about it. It was probably a typical Motte and Bailey job, but these mounds are likely not the same as the ones the castle was built on. Given the array of housing and tower blocks in this area now, these mounds have likely been reshaped or at the very least reduced. What is known is that the Castle Bailey was later adapted as a country residence and farm buildings were established to the north. Whether or not that country residence was an early form of Kingshurst Hall is also a little sketchy. Whatever it was surrounded by a trapezoidal moat with an enclosing brick wall. This was all happening in around the 14th or maybe 15th century, and little is known about the house in those times. The Kingshurst Hall that was pulled down in 1962 was late 17th or early 18th century, although it's not clear if it was rebuilt on the same spot as the original. It would have been close though, if not exact. In terms of residents, the Bulls were tenants at Kingshurst Hall until the mid-19th century. Thereafter, there were a number of others. They included the Townsend family, who occupied Kingshurst Hall from 1879 until the house was demolished and the area was redeveloped in 1962. I've got to admit, that is one of the craziest things I have ever seen in 4.5 years of doing this. A massive tower block and underneath it, a castle mound. Would you believe that? Of all the places to see one of those things, you don't expect it in the middle of a massive urban estate, do you? Right, now this estate is going to come to a close very shortly. We are on the fringes of Kingfisher Park, and this is going to look beautiful in this sunshine. Now we're heading into a huge country park which runs for almost the entire length of Kingshurst's southern parish boundary with Fordbridge. This is the vast Kingfisher Country Park. It's not uncommon in this part of Kingshurst to see foxes, wild deer and badgers, yet we are still in a very urban area. Running through this is the River Cole. Babbs Mill Lake is a notable feature of this park. In the centre of it there's a small island known to the locals as Rocky Cove. The lake might look nice, but it's dangerous. In December 2022, 4 boys from Kingshurst, namely Finley, Thomas, Samuel and Jack, were taken to hospital in a critical condition after falling under the ice and into the freezing lake water. Just 4 days later, it had been confirmed that all 4 of the boys had died thanks to their ordeal. The story made the national news. Kingfisher Country Park was opened in July 2004. The park was created to care for an 11-kilometre stretch of the Cole Valley, improving it for both people and wildlife. Alongside the river there are areas of formal public open space, tall herbs and scrub, coarse grassland and some wetlands with several small ponds and ancient woodlands. As well as Babbs Mill, the park includes a few other man-made lakes, including Shard End, which was created from the remains of an old gravel quarry. Babbs Mill Lake is primarily a flooded control feature. A variety of wildlife can be observed along the river, including kingfishers, herons, water voles, minks and otters. The various ponds have become havens for invertebrates, amphibians and winter visitors like teals and widgeons. Nearby coarse grassland provides a breeding ground for skylarks. A word for the River Cole, perhaps? It runs for 25 miles, rising on the lower slopes of Fore Hill, one of the southwestern ramparts of the Birmingham Plateau, at Red Hill. It then flows south before flowing largely northeast across the plateau to enter the River Blythe below Coles Hill near Lady Walk, shortly before the Blythe meets the River Tame. It then joins the Trent, and so eventually all of this water ends up in the North Sea via the Humber estuary. The stretch of the Cole between Shard End and Tyseley once formed part of the historic border between Warwickshire and Worcestershire. Okay, the boundary with the next one is in sight. I've only got 2 more things to talk about and they're both here on this corner. Over the road there we have the Pavilions Club. We'll talk about that next, and then we'll head down towards the allotments because I've got to keep the fans happy, haven't I? We have one final area to tackle before episode number 3 of these 5 comes to a close. At the end of the park there's a sports area which also has some allotments to talk about. Let's deal with the allotments first actually, because I know fans will want to know all about these. These are actually rather notable here in Kingshurst. Kingshurst Allotment Farm is a community-run space sponsored by Kingshurst Parish Council. Among other features, it contains 2 beehives that produce local Kingshurst honey. It also has a chicken coop for eggs and various beds for plantations of fruits and vegetables. The farm can also boast a play area with a frog pond nearby, which contributes to biodiversity. Its open-air kitchen space is used to teach local children culinary art techniques. In all, it's a really good asset that Kingshurst has to its name. The farm is the first of its kind in Solihull. It was created between 2023 and 2024 and was sponsored by various organisations. These included Birmingham Airport, Galliford Try and other notable companies. The allotments themselves date back to the 1940s, long before Kingshurst became an urban area. This is the Pavilions Club on Meriden Drive, which was built in the 1960s and then modernised in 2016. It's a sports and social club with kitchen facilities. On its site is Kingshurst Field, which is owned by the Parish Council in a covenant going back to the 1950s. The club is used for football, rugby, horse riding and other community activities. And so we've reached the border between Kingshurst and Fordbridge, which is roughly defined by the line of Cook's Lane. It's not a straight border, and as such, Cook's Lane has some landmarks within both Kingshurst and Fordbridge. For example, on the Kingshurst side is the final of the 4 churches. That's the Evangelicalism Church, also known as the Connection Church Centre. We'll see that tomorrow though, because our first task will be to walk straight down this road. See you in a bit. Hello folks, welcome back to Solihull for round number 4. We've gone through 3 of them now on one continuous walk and I'm still going. Thankfully the sun is starting to get past its sort of middle distance now. It will start to cool down as we head towards the end of this huge walk. My feet are definitely feeling it. I'm really hot and sweaty, but the show must go on. So let's carry on. This is parish number 4 and it's called Fordbridge. Fordbridge, bridge at the ford. I'm not going to lie, by this point my feet were feeling it, but we plough on. Welcome to Fordbridge, parish number 4 in Solihull. Even though Kingshurst, which we saw yesterday, is the most village-like of the places we've encountered so far, it's this one that to me felt the most rural. The irony is that Fordbridge is actually a town, despite the fact it has the lowest population of the 4 we've so far set foot in. Politics, isn't it a wonderful grey area? Fordbridge is bordered by Kingshurst to the north, and the 2 share control of a long straight road called Cook's Lane. A significant part of the town borders the city of Birmingham to the west, whilst the River Cole shapes the border between Fordbridge and the massively urban parish of Chelmsley Wood to the south. Fordbridge gets its name from a crossing over the Cole on Cook's Lane, which was referred to literally as Ford Bridge on some 19th century OS maps. The name suggests that the site was previously a ford until at some point someone came along and built a bridge in order to allow a safer, more convenient passage over the river. There are several other ford bridges in the UK, but most of them are small hamlets or little villages, and it would be so easy to confuse them with this if it wasn't such a huge urban metropolis. This one is again a huge clump of housing, and it doesn't have all that many interesting landmarks. It has several parks, a few schools, and of course water in the form of the River Cole and the Kingshurst Brook, which surround the whole thing on 3 sides. We should be through this one pretty quickly. Let's get to it and check out parish number 4. Right, so from the get-go in this one, I'll level with you. Fordbridge has virtually no recorded history, and there's a very good reason why. Fordbridge is another parish that came about thanks to the mass building of new housing estates on the edge of Birmingham following World War II. In the 1950s, when Kingshurst was being constructed, Fordbridge was still a wide open space with very little of note. There were certainly no big tower blocks. Ever since then, the fields have all gradually disappeared under a massive brand new housing, and we already know the deal with that, so there's no need to repeat ourselves. Instead, what we will do is make our way through this urban jungle and talk a bit about what's been built on the land, since this was all countryside. Fordbridge does pretty well for itself when it comes to facilities. Religiously, it's well catered for, although it doesn't have its own Anglican church. It does, though, possess a church. This here is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on Clopton Crescent. Literally right next to it is the Kingshurst and District Labour Club. Fordbridge doesn't have a lot of pubs. I've noticed this seems to be an issue with a lot of people when reading through several online community groups. When these brand new estates were built, pubs were built with them, although a lot have gone to the wall. Some have been lost, like the local for example in Smiths Wood. Others have closed and reopened several times. That's been the general story behind this one, the Centurion on 4th Drive. This was a well-loved boozer in the 70s and 80s from what I can gather. It is still open though. Now, of course, overlooking the Centurion pub there, you've got a massive tower block. Now, we've seen a few of these tower blocks already on our walk around this place, but we haven't really gone into any detail with them. So, let's talk a bit about this one in particular behind us, and some more which we'll see in the not too distant future. So far on this huge walk, we haven't seen a great deal of these things, tower blocks, but get ready. We're now in an area where high-rise flats are commonplace. Did you know that between Fordbridge and Chelmsley Wood there were once 51 of these tower blocks? Some of them have been torn down now, but the vast majority remain. These two sit at the southern end of 4th Drive and go by the names of Wedgwood House and Westham House. Let's walk to the other end of the road where there's 2 more. It's funny how most tower blocks all look the same, isn't it? I imagine they are actually, both externally and internally. Let's put that theory to the test though. There's a website out there that details practically all of these tower blocks across Chelmsley Wood. Let's compare what the information says for these two. This one is Keel House. It has 14 stories and contains 82 flats. The block was approved as part of a building plan called Area 9 North in 1968, and by 1970 it was complete. It was built by Bryant using the Bison construction technique. Standing right next to Keel is another block called Bangor House. If you use the same website, which by the way is called UK Housing Fandom, you'll see that Bangor House is a carbon copy. Same builders, same technique, and same number of stories and flats. These blocks typify the brief which building companies had in the 1960s and 70s. Design something that works and then basically copy and paste it across the entire area. Those two blocks sit close to this church, the Connection Church Centre on Cook's Lane. Let's walk down this road. Almost dead straight, it pretty much defines the Fordbridge-Kingshurst border. Okay, we have reached Cook's Lane. Now, as we learned yesterday, this is the boundary in a roundabout way between Fordbridge and Kingshurst. It's not an exact science because the boundary doesn't run straight down the middle of it. It's very close though. And at this point here, it crosses the River Cole, which is down there. And this bridge, well, that's the Ford Bridge. This bridge is perhaps the most important landmark on the road. Centuries ago, this bridge, which crosses the River Cole, was the one that would give the place its name, Ford Bridge. The chances are, although nobody knows for sure, that there was an actual ford here which people used to get across the river. At some point in the 19th century, long before those tower blocks came along, the ford would be replaced by a bridge. OS maps from 1900 even label it as Ford Bridge. The bridge you see here today is likely much newer, having probably been rebuilt at some point when all the housing came along. It's likely much wider now too. Hundreds, if not thousands of vehicles cross Ford Bridge every day, and the chances are most of them have no idea it was this very structure that was the key to the development of the area. Much like Smiths Wood, Fordbridge is another parish that's pretty handy when it comes to educational provision. There are quite a few schools here. As mentioned yesterday, the main senior school which Kingshurst children usually attend is Tudor Grange Academy. That too is on Cook's Lane on the Fordbridge side of the border. It's a co-educational secondary school and sixth form. Tudor Grange Academy was previously known as CTC Kingshurst Academy, with CTC standing for City Technology College. This was the only City Technology College to offer post-16 students the opportunity to study the International Baccalaureate instead of A-levels. Under the former name, the establishment opened in 1988 as Britain's first CTC and specialist school in England, under the watchful eye of Valerie Bragg. The Academy has since developed a partnership bringing together the worlds of industry, commerce and education, and that's seen some very good results. The Academy now accommodates over 1,600 students of all abilities from 11 to 19 years of age, most of whom come from eastern areas of Birmingham and northern areas of Solihull. When the college opened, 83% of students in the area were leaving school at 16 with few prospects of employment. However, in 2006, more than 80% of the school's children continue with education to post-16, either at Kingshurst or at other colleges. That's a massive improvement. Technically, CTC Kingshurst Academy was registered as a company limited by guarantee, whilst also being registered as a charity. A spin-out from that company was 3Es, which was responsible for the formation of the Kingshurst Foundation. That was a confederation of schools. The initial schools in the Federation were King's College in Guildford and King's International College in Camberley. The school has facilities available for use by the surrounding community via advance booking. These include a floodlit 3G pitch, 2 tennis courts, a sports hall, a gym and a dance studio. It also has an outdoor learning centre, including a replica World War I trench, a replica Saxon village, a low ropes course, a pond and more. And it's had a few notable pupils. This is quite a little list. Since 1988, this school has educated R&B megastar Jamelia, the actresses Laura Rollins and Keir Pegg, and the professional wrestler Pete Dunne. Well, I'm pleased to be off Cook's Lane. It's quite noisy, especially at this time of day because schools have just turned out, so there's traffic all over the place. I'm now on a nice shady footpath between the school and the sports pitches here. Now I think these sports pitches belong to the school. Not totally sure about that. It doesn't really matter. They're in use anyway, so shouldn't really be pointing the camera at them. So let's continue down this path. And this will take us to another sporty area. Easy for me to say when I've been walking around for 6.5 hours. The North Solihull Sports Centre is next on our list. After following that path, which runs alongside the school, we're now at the North Solihull Sports Centre on Chelmsley Road. In this day and age, when health is more important than ever, this place provides the residents of Fordbridge and Chelmsley Wood with a huge variety of facilities to enjoy. As the main leisure centre in the area, North Solihull Sports Centre has a state-of-the-art 120-station gym, a 33-metre swimming pool, several fitness studios, and so much more. If you're over 75, there's also no reason to avoid this place. Here, if you're over that age, you can work out for free during off-peak hours with a special membership card. Nice one. This is the modern version of the sports centre. There was a much older one that predated this, but it became run down and very dated. It's good to see reinvestment in this sort of thing. Next up, we have another school. Do you remember yesterday we mentioned that Kingshurst has a very large Catholic community? Well, here in Fordbridge, there's a senior Catholic school. This is John Henry Newman Catholic College, but it was formerly known as Archbishop Grimshaw School. It opened in 1970 and changed its name in 2011, but it still does the same job, in effect. At the same time, the school converted to academy status. Its most recent Ofsted report from 2012 and 2013 rated this school as outstanding. It has approximately 1,300 students and over 70 staff. On the school's website, there's a lengthy piece about the man who used to lend his name to this school, Archbishop Grimshaw. So, who was he? His full name was Francis Joseph Grimshaw, and he was the Archbishop of Birmingham from 1954 until his death in 1965. He wasn't from Birmingham. In fact, he wasn't even from the West Midlands. He came from Bridgewater in Somerset, where he grew up in a family that had strong Catholic connections. After studying in Rome, he was ordained in 1926 and consecrated as Bishop of Plymouth in 1947, and was reappointed as Archbishop of Birmingham by the Pope 7 years later. The move was actually rather coincidental because Grimshaw is a well-known name in Solihull. In Solihull itself is Grimshaw Hall. It was built in about 1560 and was occupied by a family of Grimshaws for about 150 years, starting in 1620. There was, though, apparently, no connection between the Archbishop and Grimshaw Hall. That's because the hall was named in the 1600s, long before the Archbishop was even born. So therefore, the proximity of Grimshaw Hall and Archbishop Grimshaw School is too coincidental. Okay, a lot of residential stuff coming at you in a few moments' time. We're going to be walking through another sea of housing to get to the end of this one. But before we do, we have another school to catch just there. There's loads of schools around here, isn't there? And a few other bits and bobs, including a park. And I'll just check my notes here. Oh yeah, another river. Next to pass is Fordbridge Community Primary School and the Bosworth Medical Centre as we start to head south. Next on our list is Crabtree Hall. Crabtree Hall should not be confused with the grand old mansion in North Yorkshire, famously designed by John Carr. This is a little more subtle. It's a community centre. Do you remember Auckland Hall on the Carrs estate in Smiths Wood and how that's become something of a go-to space for the locals up there? Well, here it's the same sort of thing. A few years ago, Crabtree Hall was run down and in need of something fresh to keep it relevant. That's when a group came along, transforming the building into what it is now. Crabtree Hall is now entirely dedicated to providing a safe space for young people aged 12 to 17 years. It's essentially a youth club where kids can chill, socialise and have fun. Urban Herd, the group that run it, also ensure they have access to mentoring and activities to boost their self-esteem and development. They provide a very popular after-school club and run several helpful projects designed to support young parents and children who are not in school. Essentially, Urban Herd can be defined as a community interest company on a mission to work with young people, helping them to learn skills, get paid, and build confidence. As we all know, life can throw young people all sorts of problems. These guys at Crabtree Hall help them deal with practically everything, whilst also offering paid employment to 14 to 17-year-olds. One thing you might have noticed about Fordbridge as we've been walking around is just how much there is in terms of green space. Although it's a town by definition, Fordbridge has quite a bit of greenery. You have to remember it's not that long ago that the whole thing was fields. Parts of the countryside that it's built upon were left open purposely in order to give it a semi-rural feel in places. We already know about Kingfisher Park, for example, on the Kingshurst border. There are others. Here, for example, we have Chapel House Park, which occupies a fairly large chunk of greenery on Fordbridge's western border. Follow me now along Chapel House Road as we make our way towards another one, lining the banks of an ancient watercourse. First, though, we have yet another school. They do have lots of these around here, don't they? Mind you, I suppose with such a high population it stands to reason. Well, again, we're in another quiet, peaceful area. Not much traffic down here. This isn't a major road. What this does basically is it just loops around the sort of southern reaches of Fordbridge, the sort of, main residential areas. There is another school down here, believe it or not. Schools all over the place, I tell you. This one, you can see now, is Grace Academy. This is Grace Academy, a non-selective co-educational secondary which opened in 2006, replacing the former Whitesmoor School. It's a specialist business and enterprise college. Whitesmoor, which stood on an adjacent site, was opened on September the 5th, 1969. It was the first comprehensive school to be built in Chelmsley Wood. It occupied 10 blocks and catered for children aged 11 to 18, and it stayed that way until it closed in July 2006. Grace Academy didn't forget its Whitesmoor roots though. When it was completed, a time capsule of mementos from Whitesmoor was buried at Grace. I wonder, what does it hold? Whilst the River Cole might be the main watercourse here in Fordbridge, there is a second one to consider. This is the Kingshurst Brook, which joins the River Cole at Meriden Park just to the south of Wedgwood House and Westham House on Forth Drive. Whilst it is a natural watercourse, it has been artificially straightened, quite a lot in fact. Before all of this urban spread, Kingshurst Brook was liable to flood. In fact, if you look on maps from 100 years ago, you can see the words liable to flooding pretty much all the way along its course. Now essentially canalised, the brook rarely floods anymore. Kingshurst Brook is only a short waterway. It runs for around 1.58 kilometres and most of it defines the border between Fordbridge and Chelmsley Wood. Together with Hatchford Brook, it drains an area of around 45 square kilometres and forms part of the Tame, Lower Rivers and Lakes catchment area. Our route will end shortly at Meriden Park, where the brook has recently undergone some more modern remedial work for a few other reasons. More on that tomorrow. So by following this path, which is alongside the Kingshurst Brook, you're actually on the parish boundary with the last one. Now, as tempting as it might be for me to nip across into the last one here, I still have a couple of landmarks left in Fordbridge to catch before we do. Not many of them though. I think there are 3 of them, or maybe 4. Yeah, I think it's 4. I can't even read my own writing sometimes. Now we've reached Bosworth Drive, and this is the Bosworth Community Centre, another social space for the locals. I didn't find a great deal about this one. However, during research it did throw up something I think is important. Next door to this is a separate building known as the Riverside Family Hub. Across Solihull there are 4 family hubs. They are Elmwood in Smiths Wood, Evergreen in Kingshurst, Hatchford Brook in Elmdon, and of course Riverside. Family hubs are local centres where children, young people, parents and carers in Solihull can access support and take part in fun activities. The Family Hubs team work with partner organisations such as the NHS to help Solihull residents get in touch with local services. These are services that include things like parental guidance and special educational needs support. In this day and age, that sort of thing is vital in urban areas. The hubs allow community groups to hold activity sessions in them for free so they can invest in their services. This whole area seems to be community themed. Sticking with Bosworth Drive, next we have the Seas Bar and Function Rooms, essentially a village hall in all but name. Let's head up 9 Acres Drive next, where we'll find another church which is based within yet another communal building. The church in question is the Chelmsley Wood Reformed Baptist Church, whose meetings are held in the Fordbridge Centre. They are an independent church within the Grace Baptist Communion, and they hold to Reformed Calvinistic doctrines such as the Westminster Confession of Faith of 1689. Membership of the church is open to baptised people who can prove they've been converted through personal faith in Christ. The Fordbridge Centre is a local authority-owned hall, and in itself it's not a religious building. It's good to see, though, it's in use. We see so many of these that aren't. Okay, last on the list here in Fordbridge is yet another school, but this one's a bit unusual. It's this building here. Let's check it out. The last landmark on this route is, guess what, yet another school. This one's perhaps the most unusual of the lot though. This is the Solihull campus of the WMG Academy for Young Engineers. It's a mixed university technical college which opened in 2016 and caters for students aged 14 to 19. The academy is part of the same trust that looks after the WMG Academy for Young Engineers in Coventry. So what exactly is WMG? Let's explain. The acronym WMG is the modern name for the Warwick Manufacturing Group, founded in 1980 by Kumar Bhattacharya. It was set up to support the reinvigoration of UK manufacturing through research and knowledge transfer. Bhattacharya was made a life peer in 2004 when he became chairman of WMG. Its first venture was a part-time master's degree for senior industry staff. The course proved popular with industry, and companies began to send staff to WMG in greater numbers. Bhattacharya then decided to provide industry-related research services too, after convincing the University of Warwick to become financially involved. They would loan money for a centre where academics could collaborate with industrialists on the development of new products for the aerospace and automotive industries. The resulting centre was officially opened in 1990 by Margaret Thatcher, and its success and the income it generated allowed WMG to build 2 further buildings. Now, WMG deals with things like healthcare, construction, pharmaceuticals, mining, IT and food and drink, as well as keeping a hand in the manufacturing industry too. WMG has strong links in China, where it's been engaged since the 1980s. It also has a presence in India, where it helped establish a technical university. We have reached the border with Chelmsley Wood. On the border, there's a big park called Chelmsley Wood Local Nature Reserve, which is part of Meriden Park. This will be our starting point for the final parish in this run. By this point, I was totally worn out, but I kept going. Join me tomorrow for the end of this fabulous walk. Hello everyone, welcome to Friday's episode, the 5th and final part of this huge walk. I've been going for just over 8 hours and I've still got at least another hour to go around this last parish. My feet are about to divorce me. I'm absolutely jiggered. I'll tell you that for free. However, this one should be the quickest one of the 5, to be fair, because after we've been through the town centre, it's then a huge residential area, and that's not really got all that much, to be honest with you, so we can get through it quite quick. This is Chelmsley Wood. Chelmsley Wood, Chelman's wooded enclosure. Wrapping up this incredible walk around the first 5 parishes of Solihull, today we hit Chelmsley Wood, where the end of the route is in sight. Chelmsley Wood is sometimes referred to as either the Wood or simply Chelmsley. It's a town which is sandwiched between Fordbridge to the west and the A452 and the M6 to the east. To the immediate south is Birmingham Airport, and the National Exhibition Centre isn't too far away either. Chelmsley Wood is also quite close to the Warwickshire villages of Water Orton and Coleshill, and was itself once part of that county. It takes its name from the ancient Chelmsley Wood, a large group of trees that's now virtually vanished, replaced with a massive council estate. There are a couple of fragments that do remain, but for the most part, this once leafy area, which formed part of the Forest of Arden, is lost under its urban sprawl. Chelmsley Wood has only existed in its current form since 1966, making this the youngest of the parishes we've visited so far in Solihull. 66 was the year that Birmingham City Council compulsorily purchased the ancient woodland and built the estate, and they meant business. It consisted of a huge number of dwellings, 15,590 in fact. As a council estate, it was designed to rehouse families on the council house waiting list. Fordbridge, which we covered yesterday, is often referred to as part of Chelmsley Wood, even though it's its own parish. I purposely avoided mentioning that yesterday, knowing this was coming up. All of a sudden, some of what we encountered there will make sense here. Let's finish this huge walk, folks. So then, this is Chelmsley Wood, and it's only been around since the mid-1960s. It's younger than Kingshurst by at least 10 years. Even though we're in Solihull, it was all built by Birmingham City Council, a process that began in 1966 and wasn't completed until the early 1970s. This is Meriden Park. It takes its name from the former Warwickshire district that Chelmsley Wood used to be within. When Chelmsley Wood was built between 1966 and 1970, it was originally within the boundaries of Warwickshire, as were all of the other ones we've visited so far in Solihull. Local government reorganisation in 1974 transferred the town to the new Solihull Metropolitan Borough, though responsibility for the housing remained with Birmingham until September 1980. Meriden Park is the point at which the Kingshurst Brook and the River Cole meet each other, as we discussed briefly yesterday. The park was created along the shallow valley of the Kingshurst Brook in the early 1970s to serve the development of Chelmsley Wood with a recreational space. It features a large natural lake, a natural woodland, a children's play area, a skate park and a football pitch. It also hosts a number of community events throughout the year. In 2017, the local council began restoring a disused boating lake in Meriden Park, which had silted up and stagnated. A second phase of restoration on the brook was undertaken in 2021 to further improve the stream and create diverse habitats. The work was commissioned by the Warwickshire Wildlife Trust and aimed to improve water quality, biodiversity and natural flood management. The park now features a wetland and the natural reinstated course of the river channel as part of that restoration project. The play area is alternatively known as Meriden Adventure Playground, and it's run by an independent charity. It's one of the leading adventure play facilities in the country. On one edge of the park is a statue simply titled Chelmond. The name Chelmsley is of considerable antiquity. It indicates a settlement of Saxon origin and means Chelmond's enclosure. Chelmond would likely have been the Saxon landowner around here, long before any council estates were built. He lent his name to the ancient woodland which Chelmsley Wood is built on. The word Chelmond itself comes from the Old English cheel, which means keel, as in the thing you find on a ship. Mund means protection. In addition to this, Chelmond Crescent is the name of a road which passes by the police station in the town centre. Okay, let's hop over the road then, because opposite Meriden Park and opposite that statue, there's a couple of buildings which we'll cover now, but they'll become more important a little bit later. There you can see the St Andrew's Centre, which is the building on the left-hand side, and then you've got this building with a curious roof just there. Let's check out what these are. Let's head towards the town centre next. In doing so, we have to pass two landmarks on the way, both opposite Meriden Park. This one is the St Andrew's Centre. From what I can gather, and it wasn't totally clear, this was the location of Chelmsley Wood's church until very recently. It was a local ecumenical partnership church serving both Methodists and Anglicans. However, now it's moved. From its former site, here off Pike Drive, it now occupies a shiny new building in Chelmond's Cross Village, and it's linked with Bishop Wilson Church School there. We'll see that later. The building here, now termed the St Andrew's Centre, is still in use and is primarily used as a boxing gym. On the religious theme, here next door is the Chelmsley Wood Seventh-day Adventist Church, or SDA for short. We don't see a lot of these. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a history rooted in the broader Adventist movement, which began in North America in the 19th century. While there's no specific information about this exact church, it likely evolved from local Adventist congregations. Given Chelmsley Wood's location within part of the Forest of Arden, that might have influenced the church's development and outreach efforts, given its connection to the area's history. Okay, here we go then into the town centre. Now, this was built obviously in the 1960s, and for the most part it was typical 1960s until a few years ago, and then it was changed dramatically. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So here we are in the town centre, which in the grand scheme of things is relatively small. It's a roughly square-shaped area that contains 90% of the town's facilities and shops. Such was the scale of the operation to build the massive urban area of Chelmsley Wood, a town centre simply had to be developed for the people that would live here. An independent development company was hired to design, finance and build this town centre, which was officially opened by Queen Elizabeth II in 1971. 40,000 people, the approximate population of Chelmsley Wood by that time, turned out for the royal visit. Large crowds gathered along Bosworth Drive and the precinct itself to watch as the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh toured the centre. They unveiled a commemorative plaque which is still here on the clock tower in Greenwood Square. The shopping complex cost around £3.3 million to complete and provided an essential focal point for everyone. This was, at the time, the largest housing development in Europe after all. The main shopping centre had already been open for a year before that royal visit. It opened on the 7th of April 1970. So too did Chelmsley Wood Library, built at a cost of £240,000. The town centre was classic 1970s architecture, brutalist and unforgiving. It wasn't built to last, it was built to serve a purpose, and it did that very well. It was originally designed with a focus on separating pedestrians and cars. The town centre featured covered shopping and a variety of commercial spaces. Shopping was to be accessible from one level and undercover so that shoppers were protected from the elements. There were 70 shop units, 6 major stores, a 4-storey office block and 2 pubs. Speaking of pubs, in the early days there was no local pub at all, and the nearest one could only be reached by embarking on a 5-mile bus journey. Currently, the entire Chelmsley Wood area is undergoing the biggest redevelopment project in its history, and we've already seen a few results of that process in Fordbridge. Chelmsley Wood Shopping Centre has undergone extensive refurbishment since it opened, with a new Asda supermarket serving as the anchor store here since June 2009. Okay, so that's a brief trip through Chelmsley Wood Town Centre. There's more to it than that, but to be honest with you, I really don't have the time to put it all on the map right now. You can probably appreciate that if you've watched since Monday. Anyway, let's move on. Overlooking the town centre, you can see there are 2 tower blocks. One there and one there. Now those 2 are by no means the only 2 here in Chelmsley Wood. 12 of the blocks form what's known as the Chelmsley Group, and these 2 on the edge of the town centre are part of that collection. These are Chestnut House and Dillington House, which have 10 stories each. They were both built in 1968, predating the town centre. Not all of the blocks in the Chelmsley Group were built to the same specifications. Unlike the ones we met yesterday in Fordbridge, they had slight differences. Trevelyan House and Richmond House off Marlene Croft were built in 1967 using the Bison system, and they both have 11 stories. Warwick Court and Chester Court off Dunster Road were again built in 1967 using the Bison system, but they only have 10 stories. Downing House off Willow Way and Darwin House off Alder Drive both have just 9 stories, despite being built in the same year and with the same system. Fircroft House, Avencroft House and Kingsgate House off Winchester Drive were built in 1968 by Wimpey, and they have 11 stories each. The tallest of the 12 is Woodbrook House off Hedgetree Croft. That was built in 1968 using the Bison system, and it has 13 stories. Ultimately though, high-rise flats were a relatively cheap and easy way to provide a lot of dwellings for a lot of people in a relatively small area. Flats would not account for them all though. Let's wander on, deeper into the housing estate to get a feel for the rest of the area, and we'll reconvene in a moment outside a school. Okay, into the residential areas we go. We're on Willow Way. This will take us towards another tower block you can see there. I don't know what the name of that one is offhand. We're just going to pass by that one anyway, we're not going to say much about it. And then we're going to head towards a school and then through the southern part of Chelmsley Wood Estate and take us down towards the Onward Club, which is where the parish council's based. This is Coleshill Heath School, and it was until March of this year the main school in Chelmsley Wood. That's no longer the case. This is now closed, and the main school today is Bishop Wilson School, which has occupied its current site on Craig Croft since 2013. If nothing else, this former school is something a little different from what you're about to see. We're now going to cross Chelmsley Wood to the east, and it's all going to look a bit samey. Chelmsley Wood was designed as another overspill town for Birmingham, not so much for those who needed housing after the war, but more to provide homes for those on the council's waiting list. Even so, the war indirectly had an effect on the creation of Chelmsley Wood. During it, some 12,391 homes had been destroyed by aerial bombing in Birmingham. There was to be no house building in the city for 6 years, so the programme of slum clearance had been halted. As we know from Kingshurst, by the 1950s there was a terrific demand for homes. Although large estates were built within the city boundaries, space soon ran out. By 1963, there was no further land available within the city, but Birmingham had the power under the Working Classes Act of 1900 to purchase land out of area. Kingshurst arrived on the scene in the mid-1950s, but there was still a housing shortage. In February 1965, the proposal for another large new development to the east of the city was put forward. However, this was greenbelt land, and so it wasn't easy, as you might think, to build. Permission had to be sought from both the Minister of Housing at the time and from the local government. Of course, objections were raised about the scheme, particularly from Meriden Rural District Council and the local parish councils. Even Kingshurst, as young as it was, didn't like the idea. They saw Chelmsley Wood as a threat to their amenities and as a threat to the remaining greenbelt land that separated Birmingham from Coventry. Chelmsley Wood was one of 2 sites proposed by Birmingham. There was a similar application for the use of nearly 300 acres at Withell, but that was rejected. Chelmsley Wood was accepted. It took 5 years to build the 15,500 homes in Chelmsley Wood. The land was compulsory purchased in 1965, and by 1970 it was all complete. So if there is one thing that Chelmsley Wood definitely lacks, it's a decent pub, isn't it? I saw some articles online about how many of Chelmsley Wood's pubs have gone to the wall. There's not that many remaining now. There is though the Onward Club, which is this building here on the corner of this road right here. Let's check this out. In terms of management and the day-to-day running of affairs on the estate, Chelmsley Wood is overseen by a town council, and they're based at the Onward Club on Helmswood Drive. This is a vibrant and inclusive social hub which has always had a family-friendly atmosphere and top-notch facilities, making it the ideal choice for things like celebrations. Its spacious function room can comfortably accommodate up to 150 guests and has a range of amenities designed to cater for any family. It hosts a variety of events throughout the year, bringing the community together in a warm and welcoming environment. It has seasonal festivals and live music nights, for example. Sports enthusiasts can also enjoy its squash courts and its bowling green, as well as the football pitches which sit behind the building. In recent times, this has also become a valuable hub for vulnerable people on the estate during desperate times. It's also a warm, safe space for anyone and everyone. With the decline in manufacturing industries in the area and difficulties in developing the skills required to access new jobs, unemployment levels on the estate were high. As a result, the area has suffered from physical, social and economic deprivation, and it still does to this day, even though it's nowhere near as bad as it once was. For decades, the town had a negative reputation thanks to antisocial behaviour and crime, despite the fact it's generally been far more successful than other similar council estates in England. Well, I'll tell you what, it hasn't got many pubs, but they are definitely well used. I've got good evidence for that. I'm approaching another one here, which is called the Greenwood, and there's plenty of people outside. And who can blame them? It's a nice evening, and the sun is still up. Who wouldn't like a pint outside the pub right now? There we go. Check them all out. As we learned earlier, pubs weren't important to the builders in the early days. Some came along later though, and here we have one such example. This is the Greenwood. Chelmsley Wood is actually 6 housing estates which have all merged together over the course of half a century. The initial phase of building saw 15,590 dwellings constructed. Although a council estate, Chelmsley Wood was made up to 80% public housing and 18% privately developed homes. There were to be houses reserved for 100 policemen and rows of terraced homes to be let out or sold at a reduced rate to key workers like nurses, social workers and teachers. Most housing was laid out in a Radburn style, with houses opening out onto pedestrian pathways and backing onto purpose-built courtyards for vehicular access. To enhance the openness, there were no fences between the gardens and the public open space. It was to be one of the most open-plan developments ever built. The designers of Chelmsley Wood paid attention to the site of buildings across the estates in relation to the prevailing winds. This was to ensure a tunnelling effect wasn't created. It couldn't be completely avoided though, despite their best efforts. Landscaping was to act as a transition between the roads and the buildings, in some cases to relieve the hardness of the latter, and in others to add to the visual pleasure of the area. Buildings were designed to evoke some sense of unity and harmony by obtaining good proportions and a simple use of materials. The high-rise flats were all developed with pockets of open space around them. Chelmsley Wood won awards for its design, but it did have one drawback: the simplicity of it all. The unity and harmony of the design made it appear rather monotonous. A uniform system of development evolved, and although it served a purpose, it lacked character, identity, and diversity. While we've been walking that section from the Greenwood, we've crossed Chester Road and we've arrived at the Bluebell Recreation Ground to the east a bit. This is on Bluebell Drive, and the name Bluebell is significant. Although only a name, it preserves part of the area's ancient history. It all sits on the site of an ancient woodland called, surprisingly enough, Chelmsley Wood, which in turn was once part of the Forest of Arden. It was a bluebell wood, and it can still be fondly remembered by many of the older locals who were here long before the council estates ever were. This sports ground has a modest collection of facilities, including a playground and football pitches. Sports-wise, Chelmsley Wood is represented by a football team called Chelmsley Town. They compete in the Midland League, but their ground is outside the parish boundaries. They play at Pack Meadow in Coleshill. a couple of episodes in Kingshurst, I said that it's meant to be raining at this sort of time. So says the forecast. There's a bit of cloud, but no rain has materialised. It stayed dry for this entire walk. I'm going to make it to the end and not have to deal with any rain. Although, quite frankly, right now, I wish it would rain because I'm so hot. But, you know, we push on. This is what I do. More housing for you now as we head towards a pair of schools, and then we have one final area to cover right here in Chelmsley Wood. We're now in Chelmans Cross and we have a handful of landmarks left. This here is Windy Arbour Primary School, and it's not far away from the newest school in Chelmsley Wood, Bishop Wilson. Actually, that's sort of wrong, because Bishop Wilson School has been around for decades. It's just its current building that's new. Bishop Wilson School used to be located off Pike Drive, close to where we started this episode at Meriden Park. Its former site is now occupied by 147 brand new homes. It was founded in 1970 and served the local area for many years. The school underwent a significant transformation though, with the opening of its new, state-of-the-art building in 2013. This was done as part of the North Solihull Partnership's regeneration project, and the new school was funded by Solihull Council and the Birmingham C of E Diocese. It provides education for 3 to 11-year-olds and also serves as a community hub, with St Andrew's Church, which also moved from Pike Drive, being part of the building. You know that Arctic Monkeys song, When the Sun Goes Down? The lyrics say, they say it changes when the sun goes down around here. Well, that's in relation to Sheffield. I think it's true around here as well, because now this sun is starting to set, things are very different around here. There's less traffic, it's a lot more peaceful, everything seems just dead basically. But it's still nice, you know, it doesn't turn into an absolute dive when the sun goes down around here, absolutely not. It just becomes a different place with a different vibe to it, and I quite like it. Just south of the school there are a couple of other new buildings. This here is a medical centre, and over the road is the Chelmans Court Care Home. Occupying the corner with them is a much older building, the Three Trees Community Centre. This has quite a storied past. It was originally established as a Baptist church in the late 1960s when the estate was constructed. It was later renamed and renovated to become a community hub. The centre has a long history of serving the community, including running a nursery and a coffee bar, and it was also the area's first shop. It gained the Three Trees name as part of a major upgrade and refurbishment. It still serves as a vibrant community hub, offering a wide range of programmes, groups and events for local residents. Speaking of the locals, loads of notable people come from Chelmsley Wood. the one that stuck out to me the most was a footballer, the former Watford captain Troy Deeney. Lindsay Hanley, the writer and academic, also comes from Chelmsley Wood. Hanley is the author of the work Estates, an Intimate History and Respectable, Crossing the Class Divide. A frequent theme of Hanley's work is social mobility, often based on her own journey from a working class background to attending university and becoming a writer. The celebrity chef Glyn Purnell is also from Chelmsley Wood. He's often known as the Yummy Brummy. One of 4 children, when he was young he used to cook for his younger brother and sister, feeding them beans on toast with curry powder and chopped onions. Classic council estate food. And Pele Reid, the now retired British heavyweight boxer, is also a former resident of the Wood. He still lives in Birmingham, where he's a personal trainer. His boxing career saw him land the WBO Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship, among some other lesser titles. Well, that's your lot, folks. I've made it all the way around this mega walk. I'm currently standing in a bus stop because instead of walking back to Castle Bromwich, which would be a really daft thing to do, I'm going to catch the bus. And this will take me 40 minutes back up to Castle Bromwich. It'll drop me right where I parked the car on Heathland Avenue. It's along in 6 minutes time. So yeah, what a walk. What an amazing journey. We have snaked our way around Chelmsley Wood, and yes, I know we haven't seen all of it. That's perhaps one thing that helps about it being monotonous, you haven't missed much. With this one in the bag, all I had left to do was to make my way back to Castle Bromwich, where this huge walk, the longest I've ever done, began. Now to do that, I took advantage of the fact that since the 1960s and 70s, bus services out here have increased dramatically. You can catch the X12 on Chelmsley Road, and that will take you into Solihull, should you wish to travel in that direction. I needed to go the other way, and handily the X12 stops at Heathland Avenue close to Castle Bromwich Hall. It was time to spend 24 well-earned minutes on my backside after 8 hours of walking. And that's it, folks. The first 5 in Solihull are done. We still have 11 more, and thankfully they won't be as urbanised as this lot. Join me out here again very soon to explore more of the West Midlands. It's been a great start to a great county, even though the locals will still tell you this is all Warwickshire.
Next stop, Heathland Avenue.
Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.